My daughter-in-law once laughed in my face and said, "You're going to die poor and alone." I didn't respond, not then. But today, as I sipped tea on the veranda of my lakefront home, I realized she was only half right. My name is Helen. I'm 67 years old, and until recently, I believed I'd already experienced the most painful moments life had to offer, but nothing prepared me for the cold sting of betrayal from the people I loved most. It all began with a birthday invitation. My son Ethan was turning 40, and Tiffany, his wife, insisted on hosting a family dinner. The invitation arrived on thick, embossed paper with golden cursive writing. "Join us for an intimate celebration," the kind of formality that Tiffany always favored. I spent the afternoon getting ready, pulling out a soft mauve dress Ethan had complimented years ago, and treating myself to a visit at the local salon. It felt silly, spending money on my hair, when my income barely covered rent and groceries, but it was a special day, or so I thought. The restaurant Tiffany chose was all marble floors and glittering chandeliers, the kind of place where one glass of wine costs more than a week of groceries. I felt out of place, clutching my worn handbag and wearing shoes I'd had since my teaching days, but I smiled. I was proud of Ethan, and I was determined not to let my discomfort show. When I arrived, Ethan greeted me with a polite hug. Tiffany offered a smile so thin it could cut glass. "Helen, you look presentable," she said. "Not beautiful, not lovely." Who's presentable, as if I were a shabby guest she had to tolerate. We sat, we ordered, and slowly, the evening twisted into something cruel. Tiffany talked endlessly about their upcoming trip to Santorini, her new Pilates instructor, and how hard Ethan was working at the firm. When I mentioned my volunteer work at the library, she laughed. "That's adorable," she said. "Reading to retirees and lonely kids. How noble." I kept my composure. Until the wine came. "We'll have the 2012 Bordeaux," Tiffany announced, then turned to me with a smirk. "Unless you'd prefer something less extravagant. I know your budget's been tight since you moved into that little flat." My face burned. I nodded. "The Bordeaux is fine." Ethan said nothing. He just stared at his plate. Later, when Tiffany excused herself to powder her nose, I reached out to Ethan. "Son," I said softly, "is everything all right?" He hesitated. "Mom, Tiffany and I have been talking. We're worried about you living alone, worried you're getting older, and that neighborhood. Maybe it's time to consider assisted living." Before I could respond, Tiffany returned, sliding into her seat like a queen resuming her throne. "Exactly what I told Ethan," she said. "You need support, structure. Wouldn't it be nice to have people looking after you? After all, you don't want to end up alone." Then came the words that shifted everything. "Let's face it, Helen, you're going to die poor and alone. Wouldn't it be better to do it with dignity?" It felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. I looked at Ethan, pleading silently. But he said nothing. I left without dessert. That night, I cried, but in the quiet hours before dawn, something within me hardened. I wasn't going to let their cruelty define my future. The next morning, I dug through the files I'd tucked away since my husband Michael died. Investment statements, property deeds, a portfolio I hadn't touched in years. I may have looked poor, but I wasn't, not even close. Michael had been meticulous. We'd invested in tech stocks back when floppy disks were cut. We bought rental homes in neighborhoods no one wanted back then. We lived modestly, and when he passed, I kept living that way. Choosing simplicity over flash. Tiffany assumed my rented apartment and secondhand clothes meant I had nothing. She couldn't have been more wrong. 2 weeks later, I moved into a stunning lakefront property in a quiet, upscale town 2 hours away. I paid cash. I furnished it in the style I loved: warm woods, soft fabrics, and shelves brimming with books. I adopted a golden retriever named Maple. I hosted tea parties with neighbors and joined a painting class at the community center. 3 weeks after my move, Ethan called. "Mom, you never showed up for Sunday dinner. Tiffany made your favorite stew." "I've been busy," I said. "Busy doing what?" Moving. Moving. Where?" "To a new home. By the lake." Silence. How? How did you afford that?" "Your father was very wise with money," I said. "So was I." Another silence. Then, "Tiffany wants to come see it. Says it might be perfect for when we start a family." I smiled. "Tell her I look forward to her visit," and I did. But not for the reasons she expected. Tiffany arrived the following Saturday, dressed like she was visiting a country club instead of her mother-in-law's home. Cream-colored blazer, heels inappropriate for a lakeside garden, and a forced smile plastered across her face. Ethan followed her in silence, his eyes scanning the spacious living room, the high ceilings, the view of the water through the French doors. "It's spacious," Tiffany said after a moment. "It suits me," I replied. "It must be a lot to manage," she added. "All this house, for just one person." I shrugged. "I like the quiet. Still, it must get lonely. Maple keeps me company." Tiffany looked at the dog curled at my feet with thinly veiled distaste. "You could always use the space better. Children need yards like this, do they?" She didn't answer, just wandered from room to room like a real estate agent sizing up a property. Ethan trailed behind her, saying little dot in the dining room. She turned to me. "Ethan and I have been thinking, once we start our family, we'll need more space. Our current place is too small. You should look into buying something nearby. It's a wonderful area." She blinked, clearly not expecting that answer. "Well, that's the thing," she said. "We were hoping you might consider sharing. We could move in here, help with the upkeep, keep you company, and in exchange..." Tiffany smiled, wide and unconvincing. "You'd have family close. We could all benefit." Ethan finally spoke. "We thought it would be good for everyone. You wouldn't be alone, and we'd get the space we need." I stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the lake, my heart pounding. They saw my home not as my sanctuary but as their solution. "I need to think," I said, turning back to them. Tiffany beamed. "Of course, we'll give you time. Just know how much we care about you." I smiled politely and watched them leave. Then, I called my attorney. "I need to revise my will," I said. Immediately, my attorney, Grace Liu, was a calm, precise woman who didn't ask unnecessary questions. She simply listened, nodded, and took notes in her elegant leather-bound journal. "We'll update your will to reflect your new wishes," she said. "Do you want to remove Ethan as a beneficiary entirely?" I hesitated only a second. "Yes, remove him and anyone else by association. Everything will go to the Golden Hearth Foundation. They run that home for elderly women abandoned by their families." Grace raised an eyebrow slightly but didn't comment. "Do you want to include a no-contest clause?" "Absolutely. If Ethan or Tiffany tries to contest the will, I want them legally barred from stepping foot on this property again." She nodded and began drafting the documents. The next few days passed in a peaceful blur. Maple and I walked the lake trail every morning, and I resumed my painting. The house, once filled with Tiffany's assessing gaze and Ethan's uneasy silence, felt like mine again. Quiet, dignified, safe. Then came the knock. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I opened the door and there they were, Tiffany in a pale yellow dress that screamed wealthy homemaker, Ethan beside her with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hi, Mom," Ethan said. "Helen," Tiffany added quickly, stepping forward, with a box in her hands. "We brought pastries from that little patisserie you love." "That was kind of you," I said, standing firm in the doorway. "May we come in, just for a bit?" I nodded slowly and stepped aside. We moved to the sunroom where the late afternoon light pooled over the white rug like honey. "We've been thinking more about what we talked about last time," Ethan began. Tiffany jumped in. "Yes, and we think we could make it work beautifully. We'd take the upstairs suite, you'd keep the master, we'd contribute to utilities, of course, maybe even take over the garden work." "I have a gardener," I said. "Even better," she chirped, unfazed. "And we could take Maple for walks. I've read that dogs thrive when they're part of a big family." I looked at Maple, snoring lightly on his cushion. He looked thoroughly unoppressed. "What exactly is your vision?" I asked. "Well," Ethan said, adjusting his collar, "we'd live here, full-time. Eventually, when we have kids, it'll be perfect. We can handle maintenance and errands. And in time, when you need more help, we'll be right here." Tiffany leaned in, eyes bright. "It's the best solution for everyone." I smiled, slowly, and stood. "Excuse me a moment," I said, and walked into my office, closed the door, and picked up the folder Grace had prepared. I returned, handed it to Ethan, and sat back down. "What's this?" "A copy of my updated will," I said. They exchanged a glance, then began to read. It took them less than 3 minutes for the reality to sink in. Tiffany's face blanched. Ethan's hands tightened on the folder. You, disinherited me, he said finally, voice low. You left it all to a charity for strangers, Tiffany added, incredulous. To women, I corrected her. Women who were treated like burdens instead of people. Women like me. Ethan looked devastated. Mom, you can't be serious. After everything, I said gently. I made a decision. I was tested, and I saw who stood by me and who didn't. Tiffany was furious now. You're punishing us for being practical, for thinking ahead. No, I said. I'm rewarding myself for finally seeing clearly. Ethan stood abruptly. This isn't over. We'll talk about this again. You're welcome to call, I said, standing to Bafta. If you contest this in court, you lose the right to ever step foot in this house again. It's in the documents. Tiffany's mouth opened, then closed. She looked like she might cry or scream. They left in silence, and for the first time since Michael's death, I felt truly free. I didn't hear from them for nearly a month. No calls, no visits, just a long, echoing silence that settled over the house like early autumn mist. And I didn't miss them. I threw myself into my new life with a freedom I hadn't felt in years. I hosted Saturday brunches for the women from the community center. We laughed over quiches and herbal tea, swapped books and stories, and talked about everything from politics to our aching knees. I taught Maple a new trick he could now shake, pause on command, which the ladies loved. I even began painting again in earnest. The guest room became my studio, filled with half-finished canvases, brushes soaked in linseed oil, and the comforting smell of turpentine and purpose. Then, one Sunday morning, I received a letter. It wasn't handwritten. It came in a cream-colored envelope with a typed address and no return name. The note inside was short. Helen, I know we made mistakes. I want to talk. Without Tiffany, just me. Please. Ethan and I stared at it for a long time. I read it twice. Then I folded it neatly, tucked it back into the envelope, and placed it on the fireplace mantel. I didn't respond. Not yet. 3 days later, he showed up. He didn't bring pastries this time. Just himself, in jeans and a jacket that looked wrinkled, like he hadn't slept well in days. He looked older, quieter. He knocked once, then stood with his hands in his pockets like a boy, waiting outside the principal's office. I opened the door. Mom, Ethan, can I come in? Just for a minute. I hesitated. She's not with me. That made the difference. I nodded and stepped aside. We went to the kitchen. I put on a kettle without asking, and he sat at the table like he used to when he was small. Back then, it was cookies and spelling tests. Now, it was silence and regret. When I placed the mug in front of him, he looked up. Thank you. I sat across from him, waiting. Tiffany left. I didn't flinch. About 2 weeks ago, said I wasn't useful to her anymore. Not without ... everything else. He didn't have to say what everything else meant. She said, I let you manipulate her, that I didn't fight hard enough for our future. I tilted my head. Do you believe her? He shook his head slowly. I believed her for a long time. I believed everything she wanted me to believe. I thought love was measured in what you could offer someone. In square footage and designer countertops. I was wrong. Maple wandered into the room and rested his chin on Ethan's knee. My son scratched behind his ears absently. You were right to change the will, he said softly. That surprised me. You saw us for who we were becoming. Before I even did, I said nothing, just watched him. He looked thinner. The lines around his mouth had deepened. His hands, once always moving with certainty, now fidgeted with the handle of the teacup. I'm not here to ask for anything, I swear, he continued. I just wanted to apologize for how I treated you, for what I allowed, for not standing up when I should have. Still, I waited. He glanced around the kitchen. This place suits you. I never really saw it until now. It's warm. Lived in. It's mine, I said. Every inch. He nodded slowly. I don't expect your forgiveness. I'm just ... trying to be better. I looked at him, and for the first time in years, I didn't see Tiffany's husband or the ambition-driven lawyer. I saw my boy, the one who used to fall asleep in my lap during thunderstorms, the one who built Lego castles on the floor while I graded papers. You want to come by next week? I asked. We're painting birdhouses at the center. Could use another pair of hands. His eyes filled. I'd like that. He left shortly after, and I stood at the door watching him walk down the gravel path, Maple by my side. As the sun dipped low over the lake, I felt the faintest ripple of hope. Not for reconciliation, not yet, but for healing. And that, finally, was enough. Ethan came the next week, just as I'd invited him. He brought a small bag of art supplies with him, cheap acrylics, some brushes, and a pack of wooden birdhouses he'd bought online. It was awkward at first. The kind of awkward that makes silence feel like it's humming, but the women at the community center welcomed him like a lost nephew. No judgment, just good-natured, teasing. By the end of the afternoon, Ethan was laughing as he painted a terribly uneven bluebird on one side of his house. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, and he had a streak of green paint across his forehead. I watched him from across the room as I sipped tea, quietly amazed. It wasn't a performance. Not this time. Not like the dinners with Tiffany where every word was curated. He was just present, vulnerable, real. Afterward, he helped clean up and insisted on walking Maple along the lake trail while I loaded supplies. He kept coming back every Saturday for the next 2 months. Sometimes we talked over coffee. Sometimes we gardened together. Sometimes we just sat in the sunroom with a jigsaw puzzle and silence. One rainy morning in November, I found him on the porch before I'd even had my first cup of tea. He was soaked, holding a folder and a thermos. "I brought chai," he said sheepishly. "I remembered it used to be your favorite." I raised an eyebrow. "You remembered?" He smiled. "It was easier to remember after I started drinking it myself." We sat together, the rain pattering on the roof above us. He handed me the folder. "I've started volunteering," he said. "Legal aid, housing cases mostly, evictions, women who don't know their rights." I opened the folder. Inside were notes, client summaries, draft petitions. His handwriting was familiar, but the tone was different, passionate, focused. I figured if I want to be better, I should do something that matters, he added, not just say the words. I nodded slowly. "You're becoming the man your father would have been proud of." He looked away, blinking quickly. "I hope you are too." I reached for his hand, the first time I'd done so in years. "I am." We didn't talk about forgiveness after that. We didn't need to. Some things are shown, not said. By Christmas, we were spending weekends together regularly. He brought over a scrawny pine tree. He insisted we decorate with homemade ornaments. Maple kept trying to eat the popcorn garlands, and Ethan laughed like a boy again. On New Year's Eve, we sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets, sipping cider. "Don't deserve any of this," he said quietly. "No," I replied, "but you're earning it anyway." The lake shimmered beneath the moonlight, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had not only regained my home but my son. Not the man Tiffany shaped him into, but the one I once raised. The one who was finally finding his way back. Spring came early that year. The lake thawed quicker than usual, and crocuses pushed their heads through the soft earth around the base of my porch. The whole world felt like it was waking up again, and I was too. One morning, I stood on the dock with Maple at my feet and realized something. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of loneliness, not of aging, not of being forgotten. I had faced all of it and I had come out stronger. Later that week, I called Grace Liu again. "Helen," she said warmly, "how's the view from your lakeside kingdom?" I chuckled. "Still mine, but I'm ready to do something more with it." "You mean yes. Let's finalize the donation plans. I want the house transferred to Golden Hearth upon my passing, but I also want to start the process now, slowly. I want to open the doors." Grace was silent for a moment. Then, "You're sure?" "I've never been more certain." We spent the next month working through logistics. I had a contractor come in to assess the house for future retrofits, ramps, widened doorways, safety rails. I reached out to Golden Hearth directly and met with 2 of their coordinators, women with warm hands and eyes that had seen real suffering. They walked through the rooms with reverence, imagining a future where every corner of my home would carry laughter, healing, and purpose. When I told Ethan, he sat quietly for a long time. "You're giving them everything," he finally said. There was no resentment in his voice, just awe. "It was never really mine to keep," I said. "Just mine to care for until I knew where it truly belonged." He nodded slowly. "You're incredible. I'm just done hiding who I am and what I believe in." On the first Sunday of May, we hosted an open house. Not for prospective buyers, but for prospective residents, women from shelters, older volunteers, caregivers, and neighbors. There were pastries and coffee on the long oak table, music playing on the old record player, and wildflowers in every vase. One woman, Eleanor, stood in the sunroom and whispered, "This is the first place I've felt safe in years." That night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet again, Ethan and I stood in the kitchen. "You've built something bigger than a home, Mom," he said. "You've built a legacy. And you," I said, squeezing his hand, "are finally part of it." "I still live here, for now. I still paint in the guest room, sip chai in the mornings, and walk maple by the lake, but I'm not alone anymore. Not in spirit, not in purpose, and not in love. So if you've stayed with me through this story, thank you. Maybe you've known someone like me. Maybe you are someone like me. And if you are, please remember this. Your worth isn't in what others think of you. It's in what you quietly carry, what you give without asking, and what you protect when the world tells you to let go." I didn't die poor or alone. I lived richly. And I chose who deserved to be beside me.